Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our online alumni event featuring Chris Licht, class of 1993. You know, he's the executive producer and showrunner for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He's also executive vice president of special programming for CBS. We're really happy you could join us for this, what's going to be an informative and fun conversation with a great member of our alumni family. We encourage you to submit questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen down there. I think I'm pointing to mine right now. Here you go. And so I'll remind you a bit later about that. So I hope you'll join the conversation there, add a few things, and we can get a nice rolling, rocking conversation going on. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Licht. Chris, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
All right.
Actually, I'm always here.
And I am always here. So here we are, all in our little places. It's all fun, isn't it? Man, you're sporting. Check you out, man. You're sporting that, that nice. There you go, repping. We like to see that.
First time I've given any thought to what I'm. It's the first time I've given any thought to what I'm wearing in several weeks.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I absolutely hear you. How you doing? How's the family? How's everything going?
You know, as good as anyone else, I think, who's lucky enough to be able to work from home. I think anytime you bitch about anything, you start with the sentence, but we're 1,000 times better off than so many millions of people. So we are, the kids are doing online learning. My wife is doing everything. And we're able to do the show from home, which is incredible. We are incredibly blessed for that, because a lot of my fellow productions can't do what we're doing. But we're actually doing The Late Show, Our Cartoon President, and Tuning Out the News, which is a show we launched during the pandemic, all remotely. So it's about 300 people between the three shows, all up and working. So we're very lucky, and I'm very glad for those people.
That's amazing. I sit back and I think about the fact that, like 5 years ago, you couldn't have done half of the things we're doing right now. It's amazing.
It is. And I would say even a year ago with some of it, we're forging new technologies that I didn't even know existed before now. So luckily I have a very good team that knew this stuff.
So I'm going to ask you a question that comes from the list that's apropos of absolutely nothing, but we're going to try it anyway. There's an individual out there who'd like to know if you are related to Bob Licht, who was also a Newhouse grad.
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of. He worked at WAER in 1980, back in the day. So we have many, of course, WAER connections. And I introduced you as the showrunner for The Late Show. And there are folks who don't really know what that is. So why don't you explain what that role is in a day-to-day basis?
The simplest way to put it is everything eventually ends up with me. So anything that goes wrong ultimately is my fault. And everything that goes right are the people that actually do it. But you're as the showrunner, you are ultimately responsible for every element of the production. So whether it's the camera crew or the writing team or anything else, ultimately it's your responsibility.
Yeah, I just saw a member of the production crew back there behind you.
Exactly.
That's always good. So the buck totally stops with you. You lead a large team, and so how's the team going right now? How are things working with everybody in all of their remote places?
So that's a two-part answer. One, the mechanics of producing the show have been remarkably seamless in a way that I don't think anyone could have predicted. The writers are obviously able to work from home. The research department is able to work from home. That you could have predicted, but we are cutting video clips from home. We are producing graphics from home. We actually have a virtual control room. So our director is at home and he is calling shots to the technical director and she's at home, and the AD is at home timing the show. And so with the exception of a couple of engineers who have to be in the Ed Sullivan Theater sort of minding the servers, the editing, everything is being done from home. So I would say beyond my wildest expectations of how smoothly the show is being produced, that's going great. But then you're doing that amidst all of these things that are happening. So you can't really divorce the two. And one of the things I said to my team really early on is that getting the show on the air might be the easiest part of all of this. And the actual, doing that while you have kids running around, or doing that while you're dealing with tragedy or friends, or, all of that is the hard part of it. We've been remarkably lucky that the actual producing of the show, which is keeping people employed, has been incredibly seamless.
Mm-hmm. And you have talked at many times in the past about the different challenges you've had in your life that sort of prepare you for things like that. And what are the biggest things in your background that prepare you for what you're going through right now, and the advice that you can give your team?
Well, I wouldn't recommend anyone have a brain hemorrhage, but I had one almost exactly 10 years ago. And I actually shared this with my team the first week or second week when all of this was up and running, and that I can the only thing I can relate to this kind of seismic shift in your daily life is what I went through, which was one day your life is one way, the next day it's another way. And I correctly predicted that the early weeks will be the easiest because you have this adrenaline rush, you have this can-do spirit, you have this, we're all in this together, and you are seeing the fruits of your labor in that there's success of getting the show on the air and the accolades of, wow, you guys have been able to keep the production going. And then I said, a month, 2 months in is when it'll start to get hard, because that will kind of become normal. And then you will have what we're all kind of feeling right now, which is like, how long are we going to be in our house? And wow, the school might not start back up, and we're not going to be back in the theater. And when are we going to have audiences again? And that reality starts to set in. And add to that all of the different individual challenges that people are going through. So a big part of what I've been trying to do with my team is giving us the space to feel that way. And I know that seems like a small thing, but we do staff meetings, and every week I say, there are going to be times where you're going to just not want to get out of bed. There's going to be times when somebody's going to snap at you, or you're going to snap at somebody, or just things that are out of character. And we just have to give everybody the space to not be okay. Matter of fact, it'd be really strange if you were okay 100%. The other part of my training that's been helpful is I have this gene from all of my years in news, where, and anyone who's on here who's in news, I'm sure can relate to this, where you just, you don't actually think about what you're reporting on, or what you're producing, or what you're putting into the show, because you don't have that time. So you kind of filter out the emotion. Maybe when you get home, you stop and think about it. But so that's been helpful in that I've really been able to sort of just focus on my team, focus on their feelings, focus on producing the show, and devoid myself of some of the other things. A couple times I've had to say to my wife, okay, hey, do I need to be the husband right now, or because I'm still in showrunner mode? So, keep me honest here before I try to solve this problem, because sometimes they just want you to listen, which is, not my strong suit.
So that whole piece, that whole piece though about, about just getting the product done. You sounded like every producer I've ever worked with or ever taught at that point. That whole getting into the mindset and keeping that up though has got to be very, very difficult on a day-by-day basis, because you're right. You said you're out at that 3-month period, trying to figure out what's going on there, and now morale becomes more difficult.
I don't know if I would say morale. I think it's just emotional drain. One of the first things people always ask me, like, what's the biggest difference between doing news and doing entertainment? Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is when I first started, they said, oh, we're on a 12-week run and we really need that hiatus. And I'm like, 12, what is the matter with you people? Like, when you're news, you're on a 52-week run. Like, what are you talking about? But it's a totally different animal. There's so much more emotion and so much of yourself poured into the production. So it's just a draining feeling. And we were in the theater on a Thursday, and that day Broadway shut down. It was March 12th, and we sent the audience home, and we did the show in the theater without an audience. And the 14th, or the 13th, we had a big meeting. And then we were supposed to be on hiatus the following week. And we did a couple of in-home monologues, but then took the time off to really figure out how to do the show in a sustainable way. So we haven't actually had time off in a very long time. Now, all the late night shows are in the same boat for the most part, particularly the Tonight Show, which has really gone nonstop. They were still on the air while they were figuring stuff out. But we have a break coming up Memorial Day week, and that's going to really, truly be the first time that people can unplug and really not be tethered to the work. And so the morale isn't the problem. It's the emotional drain, I think, because our morale is actually quite good. People are, we did a survey of the team just because I'm not able to walk the halls. So we did a survey, and people are doing very well, with the exception of like work-life balance and fear about the future and things like that. But we're actually we came into this in a really strong way. We had a really good team. And I think people will find that if you had problems beforehand, they've only been amplified. And if you've been strong going into it, that has helped sustain you.
Well, a lot of what you talk about is the importance of a strong team to begin with, before, outside of crisis. That's got to be a real help to you right now when you've had that level of communication with everybody on that team going in, and now you're all sort of depending on it.
Yeah, it really hammers home to me how important it is when you hire people. That, we've always had kind of the no jerk rule, that you can be brilliant but a jerk, then we're not going to hire you. But the other thing I've learned is you really have to hire people that will rise to the occasion. And I don't know how you measure that or how you predict that, but my team, my team put together the plans that got us on the air without me instructing them to do it. Matter of fact, and I will cop to this in very small groups, we had a meeting in February where my executive in charge of production said, listen, this COVID thing, there's a chance that we may not even be in the theater anymore. And I go, guys, stop. I don't want to even have that discussion like we're going to somehow abandon the theater. Like, everybody just take a breath. If people start hearing that we're talking like that, they're going to freak out. Like, let's just take a minute. And they didn't listen to me, and they continued on with these plans. And they were able to, at a moment's notice, they had gotten everybody the software licenses that they needed. They had gotten everyone the laptops and the internet connections, and so that we were able to go like that, not from me doing this big rallying cry to like, we have to go do this, but them saying, you know what, Chris, great. Yes, we're going to stay in the theater. By the way, what if we're not in the theater? And that takes a special kind of team where they know what's best and they are self-starters, and it just underscores how important it is to have those kind of people on your team.
So one big question I think a lot of people are wondering about. So what is there, are there things that are easier now in this environment?
Getting guests is easier.
Really?
Yeah, because they're all at home. So it's really a question of, are they around? And so, yeah, booking guests, we've been able to kind of eliminate the second guest, which is, the lesser known names, and really just have big marquee people who have all kinds of time on their hands. So you'll talk to them for 25 minutes and it'll end up being 2 or 3 segments. And the interviews tend to be more intimate, and Stephen is definitely having more fun with them, and you get to see their house. And so when we get back into the theater, that's really something I want to work on capturing, is sort of that spontaneity and fun and intimacy that you don't normally get when they come in and they have their team and they've been this and that. So it's much more authentic and raw.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot, and like last night, Hugh Laurie was on, and that was something that I thought was really, really interesting, that he just he was a different kind of person than you would see in the studio. That's a really nice feature.
Yeah, it's been really nice, and people, it's not much different than any kind of other Zoom meeting. You're just talking to Stephen, and it happens to be on television, so it's a lot more intimate. I really like it.
So let me talk a little bit about producing the show, just on a minute-by-minute basis. Now, I've been there a few times in the Ed Sullivan's theater and seen you at work over there on the left side of the stage, standing at a podium, running the show, doing the whole thing from there. When you start, and when you're starting to record for tonight's show or the evening show, what's that like now in this environment? How do you do that?
We don't do a rehearsal anymore, obviously, because rehearsal is to hear what gets the laugh from the staff that is watching the rehearsal. So we start the rewrite process, which is, the writers have written the monologue, and the head writers have and creative executive have edited it down, and then you go into a room and write it. And we just start that process with the at around 1:30 in the afternoon, and it's a Zoom meeting with Stephen and about 6 or 7 other people. We play back the clips within Zoom. There's someone who's specifically in that Zoom room to play back the clips, and we rewrite the show. Now I don't write anything, so I just kind of sit there and watch, but they rewrite the show. And Stephen's in his house, so he's literally in like a room 20 feet away. Then he goes into another room, and there are like all kinds of different Zoom rooms, that in those rooms are the different areas of the production. From my standpoint, I have 3 devices. I have 2 iPads and a laptop. The laptop has a Zoom that is just on Stephen, but not connected to anything other than just being in that room, so that I can talk to him, or, just kind of see what's going on as if I was in that room. Then I have a control room, what would be the wall of the control room, on another iPad, so I can see the graphics, the tape, the different camera shots. I can see the guest. So whatever the production is seeing, I see on that. And then on my other iPad, I have a virtual production line, PL. So I can talk in Stephen's ear, or I can talk to the AD to get times and talk about how long to let the interviews keep going. So I have all of that on my kitchen table, and headset in, and that's where I am. And then the whole production team is on a separate line, and then we just do the show, and Stephen does it a few times until he feels like it's right, and then we go into a postmortem, and then the editors are able to VPN into their edit machine in the theater, and they edit the show, and then I watch on Slack as each segment is pushed to broadcast control, and there you go. That's how we do it, and usually it pushes around 9:30, 9:45.
Wow, a piece of cake, huh?
Much harder than I make it seem.
So you were talking about not having the example of hearing what the audience reacts to. So how do you know how do you get a feel for what bits really work and what maybe you might want to cut out?
Stephen and Tom Purcell, who's the creative exec, there's just something, they've been in the business for decades and they just know. And there are things, a lot of times Stephen will say, the one bummer is that some of these monologues have been so good, they deserved an audience. They deserved, he really wanted to hear that laughter. But I think you do this long enough, you have a sense of what's going to work and what's not. And quite frankly, we don't know. We will never know, other than the ratings, whether something worked or not. But it's really not part of my purview at all. They just know when they read something and perform it, whether it's working or not.
Are you getting a sense that there is a type of content that seems to work in this environment a little bit better? If not a joke, then certainly something else, that the way you might actually pull something together?
I think it's more, they would say if they were here, I think that it's more how you are delivering it. That's one thing to be on a stage, deliver it, wait for the laughter and kind of interact with the crowd and, play with them. And you don't do that. It's more like a podcast now. So it's a different level of performance, but it seems to be working. And, I am one of like 2 or 3 people that actually looks at the minute by minute ratings, and, people are staying through the whole monologue. So it does seem to be, our core audience seems to still enjoy it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. It's got to be a big transition, obviously, for the star of the show, for Stephen Colbert, working in home with family. What's it been like working with him in that environment?
Well, thank God he's with his family, because they're the crew. Literally, his oldest son is a film major at a lesser school, Northwestern, and his his oldest son, he has an older daughter. His other son is a very audio-visual minded person, and the two of them switch off. And sometimes Evie, his wife, is the crew. So it's pretty remarkable. It's not an easy setup. It's dialing into different Zoom things. It's having a headset on and putting prompter here and there, and they're fantastic. So, I think like anyone else, all of our work is affected by the fact that it's taking place within, a family environment. But, look, you see my 9-year-old running around. I will absolutely miss very little about this time, but I will miss, randomly him coming up in the middle of the day and just giving me a hug, right? Like that doesn't happen at work. So it's without like getting into specifics, it's the same as anyone working at home, except they all have to be focused on the show because they're the crew.
Are there things that you're going to be changing in terms of how to put this show together because of this experience that when we all get back into our workplaces, you're going to carry with you?
Yeah, I think largely around process. And then look, if we're good at what we do, we're always evolving what the show is. Like, it should always be getting better. And I think it will certainly be affected. Not other than what I said about the guests, it's not really something we think much about right now because it's such a far off in the future proposition that we would actually be back in a theater with an audience.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it at this point. Going to go to a few questions where some of the questions are coming in. There is one question that basically we're talking about individuals who might want to apply for writing jobs or those sorts of things. Folks think, well, you might need a packet or whatever, and there are people working on that. But how do you submit those? What advice would you give for people who are trying to sort of break into that field where they might want to write for a show like yours?
So I, other than sort of tangentially, don't have a lot to do with that part of it because it's a very tried and true process. You have an opening. Like, first of all, people get these jobs and they don't go anywhere because they are amongst the best jobs you can have as a writer. So if there's an opening, they kind of put the word out. It's word of mouth and to agents, et cetera. And then people just submit a packet that is specific to, everyone writes on the same topics. And then we have a group of writers who blindly read them. So all the names and everything are taken off. You have no idea whether you're reading a man, woman, whatever. And then the top scripts go to another process, and then Stephen looks at them. So it's a very tough process. And I'd say for every one slot we have, you end up with 350 to 400 writers going for it. Mm-hmm. But that said, it's generally, we try to find different kinds of people to submit. So we're not hiring for a little while, obviously. But that's a whole part of that's a whole other side of the business that I luckily don't have to deal with.
Yeah. One thing, I don't know if you would agree or not, but it seems to me that we are at a point now with streaming services and all these sorts of things that are out there, that there is more content being created, and at least maybe that gives a talented writer or somebody who may be coming up some reason for optimism.
Yeah, I mean, look, between the three shows, we have a lot of writers working with us, and I think it's really going to be dependent on when production can start happening again. Right now, the writers' rooms open for shows that they don't know when they're going to be back in production. But when shows are back in production, there's going to be such a need for content that I think that's right.
Yeah. There are a lot of different kind of questions coming in. This one, I think you might have predicted you're going to get. But what was your time like at SU, and what do you think you learned there that you're still using?
I had a wonderful time at SU. It was great. I learned as much in my bartending job as I did working at WSYR.
Where'd you bartend though? Where'd you bartend?
It's not called this anymore. 44s.
Oh yeah.
That was really fun. And then I worked at what was then called University UUTV.
Citrus TV now.
Yep. So yeah, I look, the biggest thing I learned from Syracuse is people and interacting with people and holding yourself up against the best in the business. It definitely, I was part of a class where like kids were taking, signing out camera kits for spring break and like producing packages on their own for spring break. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, but those are the people you're up against for jobs. Those are the people you're going to be competing against. So it definitely fueled my competitive spirit. And between all of the different things, I was in a fraternity and just amongst all of the things I did, it was really how you interact and how you motivate people and how you really navigate different kinds of personalities.
Mm-hmm. You've had such a unique trajectory, to go from hard news to a topical political program to morning news, and now to this, to the Late Show. What do you carry with you from one post to the next that has served you well in all of them? Are there things that they have in common?
Yeah, when I was very nervous about moving into entertainment because, what do I know? But it's really about teams and really about how you can, I describe my job as showrunner really is removing obstacles from people's day. So if there's a process that's getting in the way of you being your best self, I want to remove that. If there is a person that's in the way of you doing your best work, I need to remove that. If there's an external force, whether it's the network or something else that's getting in the way of things, like my job is to try to remove those. And that really cuts across no matter what, your end product is. So that's really been for me, a commonality. And then there's always there's the cliche of you've got to appreciate the people who actually get your show on the air. And I certainly appreciated my crew at CBS this morning, but the crew at the Late Show is, and I'm talking the technical folks, I just don't know how they do it. And they have adapted to a late night show, essentially operating like a news show. And that is not how it was built. And that's not how anything has ever been in late night. And yet, just the other night, Trump says something dumb at a press conference, as we started taping the monologue, and we switch it at the last minute, and it's all perfectly fine. So it's just, it's an incredible group of people to work with. I mean, the host, he's fine. He could be tough. No, he's actually great. But he's really fun to work with, and that makes it all great.
Yeah, we do it with leadership and with raw sexuality is how we do it.
Oh no, I know that voice. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
Am I muted?
Nope, we can hear you.
What lies has Chris been telling you?
Well, he says you're nice to work for. Oh, there you are.
That is the biggest lie. That is the biggest lie of all time. Chris moved from news to entertainment. And over here, it's all about the moneymaker. It's all about this. Just keep this happy and everything will be fine. Thanks for it. I think it's pretty good hair today too. Thank you very much.
Well, it's delightful. It's wonderful.
You guys are just tuning in now, Stephen, because for the first 30 minutes, all I was talking about is how great you are and how none of this would happen without you. And that really the show has been so seamless because of you.
Well, I'm glad I missed it because I already have an inflated sense of my own importance. It would not have been good for me. Thank you. Chris is very nice to me. That's the best part about working with him, is he understands how fragile I am and always says the nicest things to me and about me. Chris, what is this wonderful group of people that I'm breaking in on?
This is the Newhouse School, some students and alumni, and apparently a few hundred people that are very, very bored.
and a few hundred people who, by the way, want to wish you a belated happy birthday, Stephen.
Oh, thank you very much. It was a pretty nice one. It was pretty nice. If anybody saw the show last night, I truly was surprised by my children and my wife. Anyway, I just wanted to say hi. Hey, Chris.
Hi.
It's been almost half an hour since I've seen you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for checking in.
See ya.
Checking in, Stephen. Yes, very good.
He said, what is this thing you're doing? And I told him, he's like, oh, darling.
Yeah. Well, that's all good. So lots of questions still here. So maybe we get to a few more of them there. And while Stephen Colbert goes back and probably I don't know,
Enjoys his family,
has leftover birthday cake or whatever, you know. Well, actually, speaking of that, one of our viewers is asking. Does he ad-lib the opening monologue, or does he have a prompter in front of him, or is there a combination of the two? Because he is so smooth at doing this.
He's it's teleprompter and some ad-libbing. I would say when there's an audience, there's much more playing with the audience and ad-libbing. It's tough to go off script when you're alone in a room. But his background is improv, so he certainly has the ability to do that. And I think if you watched the best and worst show that I've ever produced, which was the election night special on Showtime in 2016, at the very end, he has a impassioned monologue. Mm-hmm. And it was written, obviously not knowing that Trump was going to be president. And if you watch that, it's about 40% script, 60% ad-libbed. Mm. And I defy you to tell which is which.
Which is which?
Yeah. The real hero on that was the teleprompter operator, who kind of kept up with them and knew when she should keep going or not. Again, the crew.
Yes. Yeah. Great crew makes a great show. Speaking of that, the size of your team. So there's a question about how many people are on your team, or has that grown or maybe gotten bigger or gotten smaller over time?
All in, I'm talking from security guard, technical team, writers, everything, all in, it's about 200 people.
That's a big group. It's a very big group. Ad dollars are kind of getting down across the board, basically. What's the impact pressure on ratings right now? How is that going? And does that give you maybe a little bit more latitude to do things to sort of drive people in? Or are you even having those kinds of conversations right now?
No, we're not, because thankfully, unlike news, which is actually part of the CBS corporation. So I had absolute transparency into if ad dollars were up this quarter or down, and you would have a little extra money to spend or less or whatever, and you could turn those dials. It's very different. The show is owned by CBS, but it's a production. So it's, essentially, CBS Entertainment says to CBS Studio, we want, 205 episodes of The Late Show. Here's the amount of money you have. Go at it. And so then Entertainment sells ad dollars against it. And so that doesn't affect my life at all. But obviously, it all trickles down at a certain point. And I think it's too early to say what all of that will be. But right now, we're on TV, we're producing television, we're keeping people employed. The ratings are about what you would imagine. They were kind of all over the place in the first couple of weeks because you had Nightline and Fallon from home, but now it's kind of settled back to where it was. So, it's not, I'm really the only one that worries about that stuff. I don't want my writers to worry about it, whether they should do a bit or a joke, because it may not rate well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to me that there might be time once we get to the other side of all of this where people might actually let things settle for a bit and then decide how things are going to happen rating wise. Do you anticipate that?
Yeah, in general, look, we did not, when the ratings were bad in the beginning, like no one was yelling, do this, do that, they have faith in Stephen, and they had faith in the creative team. So I don't know. We're really blessed. We work with really good people at the network. I'm part of the network. So we don't get a lot of notes. There's a huge trust, and like, you've got this, you understand, there's nothing we're going to say that you guys haven't thought of or whatever. So we're given a lot of latitude. And I think unless we really shit the bed, I don't see how that's going to change.
Yeah. Lots of great members of your team. Amelia out there asks, is Jon Batiste as awesome as he seems?
He's actually better. He is first of all, you will not find a more squeaky clean, like, human being, like, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't go, like, just, it's nauseating. But and I actually just did a thing with NPR about him this week. He's unbelievably like a savant with music. And when we're in the theater, he actually does a little soundtrack to the monologue, and it's sort of in the background and little, but it's actually one of the things Stephen misses the most is that Batiste, kind of scoring the monologue. They are friends. He does go over there for Thanksgiving. He is just a genuinely wonderful person that just radiates happiness and inclusiveness and warmth, and is so smart about the music and just does his own thing. What I have done for Jon Batiste as his boss is to get out of his way and to keep other people out of his way. That is hands down. He has such a vision for what the music should be on that show. And it's just like, anyone messes with you, you just tell me, Jon.
So there it is again, getting people out of the way. That's that job.
Right.
That's really something. Actually, there was one thing that I was thinking about when it comes to the music. How technically do you coordinate that so that when everyone's playing, it sounds like they're all in the same room?
With the house band, there is, again, we have everybody is assigned to something. And perhaps you used to do field pieces. Well, now you don't do field pieces because we don't do field pieces. Well, now you're assigned to getting the band all together and coordinating that and getting them all to record and then putting it like, so yeah, we have a producer, and that's her gig is she makes sure that happens. And that's only going to get better, because that's probably the biggest limitation we have is getting more of that.
Yeah, very interesting. It's been interesting to hear how political commentary goes up and down throughout all of the late night shows, those sorts of things. Has it been harder to do things that are fairly political when you don't have a studio audience to react to it, or is that just a sort of a non-factor for you right now?
No, we're not a political show. We're a topical show, and
yes.
I defy you to find something in the news that has nothing to do with Trump. But no, that's not. We are reflective of what's happening in the world, or that's the stated mission. That's the goal. I always get asked, "Oh my God, I bet you guys wish there's another 4 years of Trump." Like, absolutely not. There will always be something to talk about. There will always be something to have a point of view on. There will always be commentary to be made, and I believe the election of Trump got people to resample The Late Show and reacquaint themselves with Stephen. And I could be proven wrong, but my gut says they have fallen into a habit with him. They have become reacquainted with him and are not going to leave because they have to go find their Trump fix or something. That's not what this is. This is someone who's trying to make sense of what's happening in the world in a funny way.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next question is more of a Chris Licht question. What have you liked best about the different roles you've had in different stages of your career? I mean, all the way back from local news to Morning Joe to CBS This Morning, and now Colbert. What have been the things that have really stood out for you as things you liked the most?
All of them have had things. All of them have things I really liked, and people I've really liked. Um, the one constant is that I enjoy being near, the action, being on a program or a newscast or a project that is relevant and that affects people, that people watch and talk about, and that is such a gift. And I didn't know if I would be losing that coming to the Late Show, and then boom, not at all. So that's always been the most joy I get is from being attached to talent that is really special and letting them be their best selves. And that doesn't mean just the on-air talent. That's the people, the AD on CBS This Morning who came to my office and said, someday I want to be a director. How do I make that happen? And like working with her, and now Shantae is directing CBS This Morning. Like that is as cool for me as, hey, Stephen, what do we need to do to get you back to your best self? Or, that's the, whether it's in local news or Morning Joe or whatever, that's been the coolest part for me.
Yeah, that's very cool. When you think about the guests that you've had, and of course over the last few years on Colbert, there's been just so many of them. One of the questions here is, any favorite guests or appearances that have surprised and or delighted you over the years?
Okay, my favorite, hands down guest, and probably not for the reason you would think, is so back in the theater when there are guests who cannot appear that day. So you have surprise guests, and you'll say to the audience, okay, hey, this person is not appearing tonight, but it's a surprise, and you will know who this person is when I say their name. That's what, Stephen does. And it's the only time I don't look at Stephen and I just watch the audience, because usually it's a big name, because we don't generally like take people out of order unless they're a big name. So the one that just absolutely was my most favorite was Paul McCartney. And the reason is Stephen, did that whole wind up. He looked at me and goes, I can't wait for this, because it's at Sullivan Theater, And he said, my next guest, because he's Paul McCartney. And the place, people started crying. People were just screaming. It was unbelievable. And, obviously people at home the night it aired had no idea that's why people were so excited, because they had no idea that it was Paul McCartney. But, not only does he get this incredible reception, and like you just brought so much joy into the life of these 400 people in the theater, but then he sat and did a 45-minute interview. Yeah. That was just spectacular. So, you really saw, like when James Corden did that whole karaoke special with him in London, you really can see what a genuine great person he is. And the interview that we did with him was really, really spectacular. That's my favorite sort of moment. The sort of the recurring guest that the audience seems to like the most and Stephen likes the most is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And when I say the audience likes him, the ratings, he is one of the few, like you can count on two hands, guests that will move the needle. He is one of them.
Wow. All right. So you know what I'm going to ask you next.
Sure.
So
what guest do I hate?
You have a least favorite?
I absolutely do.
Are you going to tell me?
No, but I will tell you this. The people I don't like as guests, and there's very few of them. There's like 2 or 3. It's a very commonality, because look, they're always nice to me and they're very nice to Stephen. But when I hear that they've been bad to my people, like they've been divas or, been short with these PAs and kids that are just so excited to meet them and to work with them, and then I have no use for them. And there are a couple that will never be allowed back in our theater because they were not good to our people. And it's how you treat the most junior staff member that matters to me, because by the time they get to us, they're all sunshine and roses. But if you were a jerk, to the audience coordinator or whatever, like, you're not coming back.
That's it. That's done. Yeah.
And by the way, one of them is a really big guest who we would love to have on, but we'll never have on again.
Ooh. All right, everybody, you're gonna have to figure that one out for yourselves. So I have another question about that. So you mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? You all sometimes, you'll put people on there who you may not think, who other people may not think, well, is that a guest for a late night show? But they're an intellectual. They're somebody who's maybe off a different kind of a beaten path, but ends up, with a brilliant interview. What are some of your favorites in that category?
Any politician, actually, who comes to play, meaning if you're just going to come on and do talking points, hopefully we won't even book you. But if you are, if you are a politician who comes on and has a real conversation, that's great. Mm-hmm. And they tend to do well. Our audience likes them. We don't really go, far off. Stephen once in a while will have, it's called Third Guest, Stephen's Third Guest, where the third guest is in the non-rated portion of the show. Now, Nick Bernstein, who is my colleague, who's the network executive for Corden, I believe is on this call because he is a proud Newhouse alum. And I'm sure he loves it when we put, crazy, weird third guests in the unrated portion of our show because it leads into Corden. But yeah, we kind of let Stephen do whatever he wants in that segment. And those have been some really fun interviews. But generally we do the big marquee up front and don't mess around that. But look, the Pod Save America guys, no one knows who they were, but they do extremely well for us. The largest audience we've had in months was Andrew Cuomo. Mm-hmm. So
figure, yeah.
For the record, I'm fine with it, Chris. You do what you want.
Okay. That's good. You mentioned the Pod Save America guys, and I listen to Pod Save America, and I'm surprised they can do that segment without a whole lot of things being bleeped out, to tell you the truth.
The one problem we've done 28 live shows, and we have a 7-second delay, but John Heilman came on and I believe said the F word, and they missed it. They missed it. It went over the air. But when you're on tape, you just bleep it. It's fine.
Yeah. You can fix it in post.
That's right.
When you're doing that. So that's good. You talked about political, folks, and we've just been through a primary season. Technically, we're supposedly still in it, but obviously not. Any one of the people who were going through New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina and all that sort of stand out to you as an interesting interview?
I think the person who most blew us away in a positive way was Mayor Pete. Like, he was actually, at one point, we made a joke about him in the monologue as like, come on, dude, you're a mayor, like, come on. And then he was on as a second guest and was so impressive that the next time he came back, he was a lead guest. So Mayor Pete, I think early Kamala, as she got a little more into the campaign, she had too many talking points and wasn't quite as sizzly. I think, those are the two that really stand out. Most of them are kind of boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, Trump is
Too much management, I suppose.
Trump is a very boring guest. Stephen had him on before I was on the show, and he was just boring. You know, he doesn't laugh at himself. He doesn't make eye contact. He's just so. People always say, "Oh, would you have him on again?" We would not have him on again, just because there's no upside. He wouldn't even be an interesting, fun experience. So all you would do is piss off people. So like, why would you do that?
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't like to be laughed at. We figured that out.
Stacey Abrams was very impressive.
Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, she came on and read some of her romance novel, and it was very. It was very fun.
Well, there you go. If you could build a perfect guest, what would be the ingredients to that?
Just come to play. Don't, just go off the card. Jennifer Lawrence came on at the end of a very long, promotional tour. And her genuine emotional state was, I'm done. I really have had enough. Do we even have to talk about this movie? I love it, but and that's what the interview was. And Stephen poured her some wine and or tequila maybe. And she took off her shoes and she just cuddled up on the chair, and it was a fantastic interview. So come to play, be authentic, be real, and have fun. And that is the ideal guest.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Let's think about, we only have a few more seconds. So if anyone out there still has a question that's sort of burning, I'd like to give us a moment to do that. We only got a couple of minutes. Here's one for you. Where is your happy place other than home and work right now?
Well, they're all the same. My happy place. Well, I am incredibly lucky to have been able to go to Rhode Island, where we have a place. And one of the things that you worry about is the place that used to be your happy place because you could get away from work is now where you work. But again, before you even start uttering that sentence, you're like, but, So, sometimes in the day I'll just go for a walk. And I think I assuage my guilt really by really appreciating what I have, if that makes any sense. So sometimes I will just take a walk and don't think about work at all. And I used to do it when I was in the city, when I would walk to work as much as I could because I live a mile away from the theater. And I don't think about work. I just call my dad or just something that has nothing to do with work to clear your brain. Mm-hmm. So now I do it here and just genuinely think about how privileged I am, how blessed I am, and to appreciate the fact. I mean, look, the good news is I get to spend all this newfound time with my family. The bad news is I get to spend all this newfound time with my family. But it's been wonderful, and you just have to really appreciate that, not take it for granted. And look, Stephen will probably kill me for saying this, but there's some crew members who can't come to work because they are carpenters or they are, cameramen or they are, and he's taking care of them. Yeah. And that just sets the tone. So I am very focused on keeping as many of my team employed as possible and never going a day without thinking how lucky I am that we are able to produce a show that doesn't need people in the same room. And right now we're incredibly lucky.
I think that's a damn good note to end on. Chris Licht, thank you so much for joining us in this and being a part of this great conversation. Thanks to all of you for joining us as well. Please follow us here. There will be more conversations around alumni and activities of the Newhouse School. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Really fun to do. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hub.